Okay, morning everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Democratic Services Committee on the 8th of February 2024. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Laura Griffiths, Group Manager of Legal and Democratic Services. Firstly, members, you will see that the first item on the agenda is to appoint a chair because we've had apologies from Councillor Tim Thomas for today. But I'll start by doing the business as usual, the opening statement, and then we'll go straight to nominations. So firstly, can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting of the committee, which will be held as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the website to be viewed as soon as possible following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting either from the council chamber or from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or are on silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and the chair, once appointed, will ask officers to present a summary of the key points of those reports. For the record, the agenda can also be viewed on the council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones on at that point. However, if any member of the committee are attending remotely, please can you ensure that your camera is kept on for the duration of the meeting. Whether in the chamber or remote, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or a question, just please press the hands up. We're all familiar with that. The chair will then come to you in the order that they receive the requests, and then please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting as per normal. Please do not use your microphone until the chair invites you to do so, and officers from Democratic Services Committee will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout. So I will now proceed to the agenda business, and the first item on the agenda is to appoint a chairperson just for today's meeting. It can be any member of the committee, okay? It's just for today's meeting. So if I can take nominations, Councillor Martin Hughes?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Spiller, if he'd be prepared to take it up.
And do we have a seconder for that, please?
Second.
Thank you. And are there any other nominations? Councillor Spiller?
Hi, Laura. Thank you very much for the nomination. I'm currently trying to get my laptop to join the meeting. As you'll probably have noticed, I'm currently on my mobile phone. So I'm just in the process of resetting everything. So I am having a bit of technical difficulties myself, but I'm hoping to resolve them in the next few minutes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations for chair before we... Councillor Graham Walter?
If Ian's going to, Councillor Spiller's going to be struggling, I'm happy to nominate Councillor Elaine Winstanley. But it's up to, you know, I'm not taking that away from Councillor Spiller. It's his call.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Elaine Winstanley?
Yes, I think on that basis, if Ian's having difficulties, if Elaine would step in.
Councillor Elaine Winstanley is actually in physical attendance in the chamber as well. So if there are no other nominations, we'll proceed with inviting her to the chair. So thank you, Councillor. I shall.
Thank you. Microphone on. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to get to the next item. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Tim Thomas has given his apologies for today's meeting.
Thank you. Is there any other apologies for absence? Okay. Are there any declarations of interest from members or officers for this meeting? No, that's going to be a quick meeting, isn't it? Okay, can we go on to the approval of the minutes for the meeting held on the 26th of October 2023?
Move, Chair.
Okay, is there a second?
Yes.
For that?
Second.
Happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any matters arising that need to be brought up at this point? Okay, we'll go on. Right, we're now going to the Councillor Portal Working Group update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take members through this report, but I'd firstly like to welcome the Deputy Leader. We've got Councillor Jane Gebby and Councillor Amanda Williams as invitees for this item, so just so that the committee are aware of that. So this report is on the Councillor Portal Working Group update. The purpose of the report is to present to the committee an update on the work of the working group. Members will recall that a working group was established to look at the Councillor Portal, and we're also going to feed back the most recent actions from the recent meeting of that working group. I don't intend taking members through the background because you should all be familiar with how the working group was established and the member portal. So just looking at the current situation and the proposal, the working group met on the 7th of November 2023 with a number of representatives from various service areas across the authority, and that was just to discuss a series of issues. Those are highlighted on page 12. So in particular, it was to look at departments. Officers have reported that sometimes they're responding outside the portal via email, referrals involving more than one service area or an external organisation, who takes ownership of such referrals, how referrals are then redirected, and members being aware of where the referral is, which officer is dealing with it, particularly when it's going through the escalation process. There was also a request to review all response times across the service areas. Those are known as service level agreements, but just to clarify for members, that's the time response. It's actually not a formal service level agreement, from a legal position. Then following discussions, the group made a series of conclusions and agreed actions include an agreement that that we explore further the need to look at whether referrals could be sent to more than one location in the portal. At the moment, you can just send it to one service department. And then obviously members recognise that that would allow a more collective response if we were able to, send it to more than one service area. It was also agreed by senior officers and members that investment into the development of dashboards would be very beneficial, and there was consensus that this was required to monitor and analyse referrals appropriately, both from the member side but also from the officer side, and also for officers to help identify where there may be a particular service area issue or areas consistently not meeting those response deadlines. Members also highlighted that access beyond ICT to this data for the purpose of responding to freedom of information requests was also required. We do have a number of freedom of information requests asking for information in relation to member referrals. So it's knowing how much information we can actually generate from that portal so that we can fully respond to any FOI that we get. Just quickly looking at future meetings, the working group have agreed to meet again in 6 months' time, and that's just to allow further work to be progressed. So at the moment, we're looking, Chair, at reconvening that in May 2024. At Appendix A then, for the committee's attention, you will see that there has been a review of all of the proposed response times that have been put forward by various service areas. At the moment, in accordance with the policy for referrals, the current aim is to process all referrals within 10 working days. So there is now a proposal that we look at possibly extending some of those deadlines. Obviously, the working group welcomed the views of the committee on those proposals, but I think it also needs to be noted that those would obviously have to be then brought to the attention of the relevant corporate director so that they can also agree those service level agreements. I'll just then take you to the recommendation, Chair. Also just to note for your attention, Chair, I believe Councillor Graham Walter is chair of that working group. So if you possibly wanted to invite Councillor Graham Walter in as chair of that working group. But otherwise, the recommendations, as you can see, member, they are to note the update, provide any comment on those proposed timeframes that are in Appendix A, and then any comments or suggestions that you would like to take back to the working group so that they can further progress that as part of their further work. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, have we got a mover and a second?
Move.
Yeah, second.
Thank you. Okay. And do I have any comments? I'm sure there's chair of the group, Councillor Graham Walter, may have some comments to make.
Thank you, Chair. Not really. I think it was a very comprehensive summary. When meeting with officers over the 3 or 4 meetings we've had, there has been some fairly robust challenge, which has been met with detailed explanations as to some of the issues that we've highlighted. And I think we've probably done the best we can do for now, given resource constraints, both financially and human resource. So I've nothing more to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments that people would like to make, or suggestions or questions? Thank you. Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to comment, I was a member of the working group, and I found that that experience was really interesting, and certainly learned quite a bit about the process. I think the main message coming out of this is that we are where we are with the system. It's not, it's far from perfect, but it is the only system that we have, and we just need to make sure that we maximising it as best we can for what we need it for. From my own perspective, maybe it's because of the focus on the portal. I think I have noticed that there's been some more feedback, certainly in terms of any cases that I might have put forward, and they've been reallocated, and I've been kept informed of that. And I think that's a very positive move. Although, I have to say that there are still some sections who aren't replying through the portal, but are still emailing, to which I think a number of us, what we do is we save those responses and put them back into the portal to make the point that, look, this is what the portal is for. As members, we're expected to utilise it, and we certainly expect officers to do the same. So as a way of sort of re-inputting it back into the system there. The only other comment really is that all IT systems like this, as much as possible, need to work together. We've got the council website with the sources of information available there, but we don't yet have that interaction between the portal and the website, because the two are interrelated. We get a lot of information from the website, and that would help you then in determining how to put a case forward, particularly on a subject that is sort of slightly unusual that you're not used to dealing with. So thanks, Chair, and let's look forward to progressing now at the next meeting of the Working Party.
Thank you. And thank you for those comments. That's really useful. Can I now call upon Councillor Robert Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the working group. And thank you for that report. I think my question, my kind of observation, should I say, is probably in relation to the financial constraint aspect. And I've never quite been able to understand where Granicus, which seems to be the portal in the bottom left-hand corner, is this an off-the-shelf product that we've sort of purchased and paid for? And I'm not quite sure how much control we have on the back end with our developers to be able to amend some of the aspects that sort of cause us some issues with it. I think the user interface could do with a bit of work, which would probably cut back on quite a bit of the sort of loop that we get going round and round. So I'm not quite sure if anyone has an answer there, or whether I could go back to the working group to investigate these financial restraints and what they are. Because do we have every change we look to make or request, perhaps? Is there a cost from Granicus? Because I don't know how they sit here, or is this all dealt with by our own in-house team? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I confess I've got limited understanding in relation to how it works technically, but from my involvement when it was initially established, it is an off-the-shelf project. You are able to rebuild it and put in requirements, but there is a substantial cost to that, Councillor Smith. So it is, I believe it's an off-the-shelf project. Like I said, I think it's used in other local authorities, not in Wales, I think in England. But every time we want to make a change or build things in, change the dashboard, redirect things, there would be a cost, because obviously there'd be work that Granicus would have to undertake.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Would it be possible for us to be furnished with what those costs look like, perhaps? I'm not sure whether we are able to see, what the contract we have with Granicus, for example, is.
Yes, of course. I'm not sure in terms of what the current arrangement is with Granicus and what they've technically got to, provide under that contract, but certainly we can get that information, Chair, and we can feed that back through to the committee.
Thank you.
That's been a useful interjection. Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Spiller?
Thank you, Chair. Glad that I finally managed to get my computer reset and working properly. But it was just a query over the SLAs. Obviously, there's a conversation there about changing from 10 days. Do we know where the current SLA response times are for the individual services? Because that would be very useful to understand for I think the committee prior to changing anything.
Thank you, Councillor Spiller. A very interesting question. I'm afraid I don't have that data in relation to what the current responses are across the service areas. At the moment, the policy is 10 working days. You'll see from Appendix A that the majority are to remain at 10 working days, with the exception of, I think we've got Blue Badge, quickly looking at it, building control, dangerous structures, drainage and flooding, crematorium, they want to go to 28 days. Green spaces, I'm just quickly going through them. Highways, they would like to progress to 28 days. Some housing where we've got disabled facilities grant housing support, they'd like to go to 15 days. Parking and parks, 28 days. Planning, they want to go to 21. Planning enforcement, they want to go to 42. All quickly, rights of way, 28 days. Street works, 28 days. Tourism, 28 days. Transport, 21 days. Transport, 28 days. Transport, 28 days. I believe that the majority of the delays do sit in communities, looking just from initial data that I've had, but to give you an overall position, I'm afraid I'd have to come back to you, Councillor Spiller, but I agree it is worth having that data you know, when we're looking at these response frames moving forward.
Absolutely. So if I may come back in, Chair. So thank you. I think that, you know, it's all well and good them telling us what they'd like them to be. Really, we could do with understanding some robust data on where they are. The pressures on human resources have never been greater. And what I want to understand really is whether what they're proposing is actually feasible and is going to provide a service that's realistic.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, I'll call upon Councillor Jane Gebby.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting me today. I felt it was worthwhile having this conversation and debate, I suppose. I'm an old member and I'm used to an old system, and I sat in Cabinet and using an old referral system as well. So from a Cabinet perspective, there's real difficulties with the portal, and I know that's been represented within the portal working group. And I suppose some of the, so first and foremost, you know, I've got some notes here about what my position, I suppose, around it. And just to give some positive framework around some of this work, the report it function, I think, is excellent, particularly for the members of the public out there. It's the fact that any resident can use it and you can report anything you like wherever you are. And I think that's brilliant. I have real issues with the portal system, however, because I can't just copy people into one email. When I used to send it into the old system, which we still use currently, so, you know, I debate the fact that we've only got one system. We've still got two systems in effect, Councillor Walters. We have an MSMP referral system that's called OTRS, and it's for all our Cabinet communications with anywhere external and within and with more than one person and one department is what I want to say. So the more complex arrangements. And we don't have that functionality on the portal. And I'm also not sure that it's appropriate to put it all on the portal for everyone to see, because that's a breach of GDPR. The only reason somebody should have access to some data is because they are directly involved with that referral. It shouldn't be for anyone to see it. And currently, I have real concerns around the data requirements, despite reassurances that I'm getting from officers. And I know that that access has been since limited, but I still don't think it's been limited enough. We're all here in a political capacity. There are political nuances to various responses that you may want to send people. And there's a deliberate reason for that, because I need to ensure that council is following policy. And if something is wrong, how do we investigate that before we give an appropriate response? Because I want to resolve it before it's gone anywhere, because that's the best representation for BCBC that way as well. There's something around the redirection option that we have now. You know, there's no ownership of that. We put a referral in. If it's for two departments, it can only go to one on the portal. And then somebody has to take responsibility and ownership to refer it on, which isn't working very well because officers really don't understand the system at the back end. So and then who takes ownership over it once it's been redirected? Who knows? Because I think every member on the call will be frustrated by some of the responses they get, where you don't actually know who it's come from. So, you know, there's that as well. We do all sorts of external referrals to all sorts of agencies, and they're all recorded. And we can keep that data to all parties in one place under one unique referral system number. We can't do that in the portal, because once it's gone one place and it's closed, it's then closed. On OTRS, we can actually reopen a case if we need to, because things have escalated or the resolutions that we put forward didn't quite work for whatever reason. So I think there's a wider discussion on that. And we need to be able to merge tickets as well, because quite often there'll be, you know, I know from my own experience that I'll get copied into another member referral because the leader or Councillor Kern hasn't seen one that I've already done and it's about the same thing. So we're duplicating effort where we really shouldn't need to be doing that as well. And the portal is reliant on our officers understanding the whole system and the operation of other directorates within the system. So I think that's my perspective from this. I think if it's really simple, that's great. And if it's not, then actually I need to do it in another way and resolve the issues. Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So the reported function's working well, but when there is a need to merge tickets and there's a need to have some ownership on the redirecting of referrals and where they're coming from. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call upon Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, sorry to come back in, Chair. Discussion about the SLAs was interesting, isn't it? But I think what we also need to bear in mind that those are maximum times, and there are issues that are urgent. I think the Working Party picked up on that, and there was a recommendation that where members deem that a particular case is urgent, then you should include that on the subject heading, and we certainly expect a response way before the SLA time. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, urgent ones need to be, and I was a little bit concerned with some of the timings on the appendix, because some things you would think would need to be picked up a lot sooner. Okay, Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting me here today for this item. I just wanted to update further to what Councillor Gebbie said. We've been raising a number of issues as well in our group leaders meetings. For example, I think one of the common themes was when you're putting in a referral and it's being closed down, not always getting the reason why it's closed down. So we've been asking whether it's possible to put in a reason, because all you're getting at the moment is closed and action taken. But quite often you've put a referral in rather than a report it, because the member of the public wants that information back. They want a response, and we're not getting responses at the moment. Now, I've been told it's quite difficult to do. We've put forward some suggestions, for example, just a standard text box. Instead of just saying closed, could they have a number of options of text boxes? So that was discussed in our last group leaders meeting. So I'm hoping we'll have an update on that at our next meeting as well. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, is there anybody else who needs to say anything on this report? Okay, so we can move the recommendation. Is everybody all in favour?
Aye.
Yes.
No objections? Great, thank you. The invitees can now leave the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gebbie and Councillor Williams. Okay, we're now going to go on to the Member Development Programme update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So members, the purpose of this report is to provide you with an update on the delivery of the Council's member training and the development programme and the related activities, and to request the committee to identify any further topics for inclusion in your development programme. At Appendix A, members will see details of all the training and development sessions that have taken place as part of the member development programme, and that's since you had a last report back in June 2023. Training requests have been regularly forthcoming from both members and officers, which has been welcomed and encouraged because it enables the programme to be specifically targeted to needs. We've had some training sessions by Data Cymru to assist scrutiny members, Primary care access standards was provided. We've also had cyber ninjas from Welsh Government. That's ensuring members stay safe online, as well as equality unconscious bias training took place to support the Council's commitment with its strategic equality plan. Members will see at 3.4 that the Development Control Committee have had a number of training sessions since June 2023. So those are all listed, training taking place in June, July, September, with the last training in January 2024 on appeals and statistic and key decisions. We've also had a number of council briefings that members will be aware of, with the last one taking place on the 17th of January with South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Attached to Appendix C then, Chair, we've got, I believe, an attendance record of all of the training sessions that have been undertaken. Since the publication of the report, there have been some amendments, so I'd just like to verbally give those, Chair. We need to make a correction in relation to data protection training, which took place on the 15th of September. That was run by myself. And we need to amend to say that Councillor Martin Williams was actually in attendance at that session. I do recall that, Chair. So apologies for that. We'll look to get that updated. Just to clarify for the committee as well, the Data Cymru sessions over the past 2 weeks, you will see that the report attendance goes all the way up until December 2023. For the LDP and the 20-minute town briefing, that's also been provided to the Town and Community Council Forum, again, just so members are aware of that. And we've also had some queries back from members via the Democratic Services team as to whether there are circumstances when members can be exempt from attending some of the e-learning training modules or training sessions. So Rachel, the Democratic Services Manager, is going to make inquiries with the Learning and Development team. At the moment, we're aware of all of the training that is mandatory, but obviously it has been brought to my attention that, for example, there's a data protection e-learning training module that is mandatory, but I also provided that in person, so whether members actually have to do both. At the moment, there is a requirement to do both. For example, I've also got to complete that training, even though I actually wrote it. But what is mandatory is currently listed as mandatory, but we are going to make inquiries into whether possibly members can be exempt. For example, we know that some members have attended a number of safeguarding sessions that are actually higher than the e-learning module. So it's whether they again can be exempt because they've attended much higher sessions. So obviously we'll look to bring that back to the committee. Also, just for members to be aware, we will be sending out communications to advise that Democratic Services team are going to be running some sessions where members can come in and actually complete the e-learning training modules with an officer if they need assistance with that. So that's more for our members who aren't fully computer illiterate. So we're going to be looking to run those, and obviously we'll get the comms out in relation to those. Appendix C then, Chair, shows the future member development, personal development reviews. So that's scheduled to take place over the coming months. We've got personal safety, anti-racism. Those are just some of the examples of the sessions that have been specifically requested, including climate change. So those have all been added to the programme moving forward. Just to flag up to members as well, it's outlined at 3.7. At a recent Governance and Audit Committee that was held in November, during consideration of a monitoring report on corporate complaints, members of that committee highlighted that they sometimes experience issues on the subject when engaging with their local constituents. They would therefore like councillors to possibly benefit from having some additional training on handling complaints, potentially some challenging situations involving constituents in respect to that complaint process. So that has been added to the Governance and Audits Committee action record that was considered by the committee back in January of this year. And it's been put to this committee whether we actually want to include that in a future member development programme. Quickly then, we've got the e-learning modules, that's outlined at paragraph 3.8. Just a reminder to members that all of those listed at 3.9 are mandatory. So it includes the corporate induction, UK General Data Protection Regulation, Data Protection Act, the display screen equipment, fire safety awareness, ICT code of conduct, safeguarding for children and adults, and also violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. Looking at the stats so far, 28 members have accessed the learning and development site, but only 10 members have completed all of those 7 mandatory ones that are listed. And it's just to remind members that during an internal audit that was reported to the audit committee, elected members were to be encouraged and reminded to complete all of their code of conduct and mandatory e-learning module trainings. So therefore we would encourage members to revisit that e-learning website and undertake those additional modules. There's briefly information then at 3.14 in relation to the learning and development website for members' attention. But otherwise, Chair, I'll take you to the recommendations, which is for the committee to note the report and its appendices, and then to identify any additional member development topics that you would like to include in the programme moving forward, noting that there has been a recommendation from the audit committee that we look at corporate complaints and how members handle responding to complaints. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a mover for the report?
Yes, I move, Chair.
And a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to comment on the report. I'll go over to Councillor Ian Spiller.
Thank you, Chair. A number of reports. Thank you very much, first of all, for the report. I have concerns about duplication. For instance, safeguarding concerns with regards to governors that will have undertaken that training and are then being requested to do it twice. I note Laura's update, obviously, that that we are looking into removing this duplication, but councillors' time and officers' time is precious, and for people that have attended it and done it more than once, to expect them to have to keep doing it because it's ticking a box in a system, I think is frankly unnecessary. Also, I note that there is a specific line in there for the LDP and 20-minute towns. This was also a briefing for the Town and Community Forum, and some councillors would have had that briefing in that forum, so wouldn't necessarily have needed to then go back and do the second session, but we've not ticked whoever actually attended that Town and Community Council forum as actually receiving the training from as far as I can see, because there is definitely some missing within there. On a third point with regards to mandatory training, I work for a business who has requirements also to undertake mandatory training with its employees. Some of those are financial considerations for compliance under the FCA. Some of those will be equality, diversity and such as well. When mandatory training is required to take place, a reminder email is sent periodically to remind people that that has not been undertaken. From my own personal experience, and I can only speak for myself, I thought I'd completed all of those modules, and I was quite aghast when I read the report to note that I hadn't. To actually see that for the first time was quite surprising, actually, because I felt that I was one of the 10 members that had actually completed that training. So could we please look at some kind of automation where we're meeting the requirements as laid out by the audit committee, which will actually remind members to undertake future mandatory training to prevent, obviously, putting ourselves in an issue of uncompliance. And one further point on that, with regards to Welsh language awareness. Whilst I am more than happy to undertake that training, I wonder for people that were educated in Wales and took Welsh as a GCSE, whether that is solely necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spiller. I'll certainly feedback all of that to learning and development. I know for officers, managers will get a regular report of what officers have completed each module and what remains outstanding. So then as a manager, I can chase those employees. But it's certainly something that we can look, just get some reminders out for members. I didn't appreciate that wasn't taking place, so we can certainly do that. I know with the learning and development from completing it myself that you think that you've completed it, but you actually have to tick further boxes or open further boxes before it actually shows as completed on their side. So whilst you may think you've gone through all of the boxes, you've actually missed something or missed a small box that you haven't ticked, which then doesn't allow you to continue. So, but certainly again, I will go back to learning and development and check that that your figures are correct if you feel that you have completed those. But like I said, it might be a case of, again, you haven't completed all of those boxes. Again, I agree for those members that attended the training via the Town and Community Council Forum, I think it makes perfect sense for them to be exempt. Again, like you said, if somebody has got a qualification in the Welsh language, it seems of little relevance that you then have to do the e-learning module. I'm only giving my own example that I wrote the data protection e-learning module, but I've also got to complete it, which, but there we go. But certainly we'll be looking to see if we can get those exemptions, and we'll certainly feedback that via to members at the next meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That certainly raises a good point, because obviously there are many of us who also do very similar modules like yourself and myself in our places of work, and therefore we can't remember whether we completed a particular module with BCBC or whether it was with our work, and it covers exactly the same material, and sometimes in more depth, as has been mentioned. Okay, I'm going to go on to... Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, may I just come back on one more thing? We have also undertaken equality, diversity and inclusivity training. So is there a need that once we've attended that training to then do a further introduction to it as an e-module? Because either we should do it as an e-module or we should partake in the training. We shouldn't have the duplication on both. And the training was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I don't see the need for undertaking it twice.
Thank you. Yeah, good point. We'll have to have that duplication looked into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to call upon Councillor Martin Hughes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think that communication with individual members is particularly important. It's that prompt, and I think we all need that. But I think looking at taking a holistic view of the report, it is worrying that just over half of members have accessed the learning, and only 1 in 5 have actually done the mandatory training. So this is an issue, it's a concern, and we do need to address it. I think Laura's proposal about one-to-one meetings and if you like coaching of members, of going through the email, the learning process is a good one. I think we need that chivvying up, certainly, but I think if there's a way that we can possibly link that up with the one-to-one meetings that we as individual members have with group leaders, I think that's quite good, because that sort of meeting takes the form, I guess, of a sort of annual appraisal, and it's good to revisit these at the time as well. So yeah, we do need to really concentrate on getting these figures up, I feel.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Graham Water.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Martin's stolen my thunder a little bit. Really welcome the announcement from Laura that there's going to be support in person for people with the e-learning. I've reported via this committee twice difficulties that I've encountered, and I know other people have, in terms of I think it was referred to, missing the odd box means you think you've completed the module when in fact you haven't. And actually I find it quite a clunky and cumbersome portal to use. So I really welcome that. I think that's a positive step forward. And if we can communicate that effectively, I think we'll see quite a significant uptake. I know I will for certain. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go over to Councillor Richard Granville.
Thank you, Chair. Can I apologise first for not, I had an emergency and I couldn't start the meeting. There's an easy way around this for Laura to deal with it, and the council, as far as I'm concerned, is where we've got problems where people are not doing it, it goes into their calendar as a red marker and they have to attend it. If they don't attend it with a good excuse, then it has to go up the chain and, you know, somewhere along the line, it has to be done, right? And that's what she's saying. So I would suggest to Laura that it goes in on your report, on your forward work program as for members, under red, and then everybody should know that they've got to do that e-learning or whatever it is. It's there to be done, and then any ambiguity should go out of it. That's my way forward, anyway, Chair, to make sure that it gets done.
Thank you. Is that just for the mandatory ones, I would have thought? Or... Correct,
Chair. Well, all of them, if you want to do, yeah, but mandatory more than the other ones, yes.
Thank you. It's only a visual reminder. I tend to do things in the calendar, but I have to admit, I thought, oh, have I done any of the e-learning ones? So it's been really good for me to look at that. I did have my own suggestion as well, that maybe what we'd need is, I find it tricky if we have lots of training that's scattered throughout several days in 1 week. It's easier for me to organise my life around if all the training is compressed into 1 day, or it's well spread out. Those two work for me. I don't know if anyone else has got any comments on that as a way of organising training. Sorry, Councillor Richard Granville.
Yeah, just to come back on that, Chair, look, I think Laura as well and Democratic Services need to look at the calendar where sometimes meetings cross as well and people have to pick which ones they're going to. You know what I mean? If you've got more important ward ones that you're dealing with officers, you go to that first. So I think the Democratic Services have to look at that and programme into the programme of the calendar when you're feasible. If they talk to a member and say, are you free on that date, blah, blah, can you do the e-learning? That would be better again. There'd be no duplication, as Councillor Spiller said. You know what I mean? So it's a lot easier to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Ian Spiller.
Thank you, Chair. I think just kind of echoing really what Councillor Granville said. Look, take Monday as an example. There was a briefing for elected members on Estin reports. There was then a Cardiff Capital Region briefing. Then there was further StreetSnap training in person, all within a few hours of each other. It's not always clear what's mandatory, what's discretionary and what's advisable. Now, I wasn't able to attend the StreetSnap training for councillors in person, but I understand that they wanted to download apps onto people's phones, and it was in fact a very, very good training session. But you know, having it all rammed into 1 day can make it very can make it very unachievable for some councillors to attend. And you know, I just think sometimes that we do need to look at that calendar to try and give members the opportunity to attend as much as possible.
Thank you both, Councillor Granville and Councillor Spiller. We'll certainly feed that back. I think it would be useful if moving forward, when the appointment goes in the calendars, that we will indicate whether it's mandatory, optional. I certainly wasn't aware of all of the training that took place on Monday. I know the team do very much try to spread it out, But again, it depends on committees, whatever, and the availability of the person then who is providing the training. But certainly we do try to avoid a full day of training because we're mindful of members who are working. I think the beauty of the e-learning modules is that members can do those at their own time. So you can do those at a time that suits you. But again, we will have those sessions where members can come in, they can sit with members of the Democratic Services Committee and Democratic Services team and have some support equally to make sure that you've ticked off all of those boxes so that you then don't have to go back and revisit. So we'll certainly look to do those. And I think it is useful to have those drop-in sessions with Democratic Services team anyway, just in case members have got any other queries that they would like to flag up the team. But we'll certainly feed that back. But we do, like I said, we do try to spread the training out wherever possible, but it is very, very difficult. And we've got quite a full training development program, which is excellent. But I agree, it's trying to make sure that we take into account those members that work. I do believe some of the sessions, if they are recorded, we could look to actually put them somewhere on the website for members so that you could watch them back. And then that could almost count as your attendance. So that's certainly something that I'll take back and see if I can, if we can do that so that you could watch the training back if you weren't able to actually attend live. But yeah, certainly I'll feed all of this back. Thank you.
Yeah, it'd certainly be useful for recorded training to also be that we can say that we've done that training to Democratic Services. That would be really useful. Councillor Spiller, did you want to come back in?
Yes, just to agree on that point. First of all, there are a number of meetings that I've not been able to attend the full meeting, where I have gone back and watched it on the chat function. Obviously, that's just for my own information more than anything else. But certainly for training, a lot of them are PowerPoints, and they are information that is thrown at you with respect, rather than interactive sessions. Not all of them, but some of them. And where they're information, I see absolutely no reason why we couldn't just download that session. That can easily be recorded. Who has watched it from start to finish? You can disable the fast forward function on a video. I know that because we have them on GDPR and things like that in work. And then members can obviously then undertake that training or those videos at their own time. I think what we have to be very conscious of is these are going on reports that are publicly accessible. And for us as an authority, we want to make it as easy as possible for our members to undertake that training and have that information given to them. But also, we don't want to make it look like members are avoiding it where they may not be intentionally avoiding it. And it's about perception, isn't it? At the end of the day, I'm sure all members are here to try and do the best for their communities. But likewise, having a report that shows perhaps that we're not undertaking that makes it look slightly different. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Granville?
Just to say, Chair, I agree with what Councillor Spiller is saying. And the other thing is, I attended the Street Snap programme, and I would recommend any member should go on it, because it's an app on your phone where you see graffiti, you take a photograph and it gets reported straight away. So you're not going through the system. It's a fantastic system, and I would recommend anybody doing it, because it indicates then on your street map where it's been logged, and you can monitor everything on your phone. It's a fantastic, I would recommend anybody going on it, Chair.
Okay, that's a great, thank you for that, because it does show that when we do these training sessions, they are appreciated and they do work. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take members' views on the recommendation that has come from the Audit Committee in relation to the corporate complaints training, and whether the committee thinks that it would be beneficial to add that to a future training session. I'm not sure how that would look like. If anybody's got any feedback that they'd like to give, if you're dealing with difficult, vexatious complainants, certainly corporate complaints sits in my team, so I'm happy to offer any advice there. But if there's anything specifically that you would like us to look for a training session, then we can certainly look to include that in a programme, but be grateful for views of what you would like that to cover. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so has anyone got any suggestions on that? Councillor Granville?
Well, Chair, I sit on the audit committee and we discussed it like Councillor Martin Hughes. And basically, I would recommend that, because if you have got somebody that you're dealing with and it is vexatious, or he's making allegations against somebody, it's good to have a bit of training how to deal with that and calm that person down, because it can get a bit hot at sometimes. And I've been in that situation, been a borough councillor for over 20 years. I've had to deal with that, and I've been in awkward positions sometimes where you're on your own and there's 2 or 3 of them and they're chucking stuff at you. You can't take it all down either. So I would recommend it, you know what I mean? Because we have got the police programme as well to come on, haven't we, for safety. So it would in line with that as well, I think.
Thank you, yes. Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think there's also quite a lot that we can learn as members about how to respond to residents who wish to make complaints as well. And I think that advice would be particularly useful. But I think in looking at complaints, we mustn't lose sight of compliments either. It's a two sides of the coin, isn't it, really? So I think we need to take those into account as well.
Thank you. Is there any other? Oh, Councillor Robert James, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, when we talk about complaints, all right, and the pressures on some of us borough councillors, I have brought up an issue with a cabinet member over the case with the former councillor, Ellie Richards, who suffered a lot of online abuse. One of the things that I brought up, and it was brought up in the last one council meeting, of jobs and work that has been done in our community and we've not been informed of. Quite a couple of years ago, once a month, we were having an email saying what work's to be done, where it's being done, all right? And we knew what was happening. An instance with me last week where they put up traffic lights on our main road, traffic jams everywhere. I wasn't even informed of it. So that's an ongoing thing which I think would cut out some of the abuse which we suffer on social media, and Councillor John Spanzik is looking at that issue for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor James. That's an interesting point, and I wonder whether that's something that the portal group could pick up, because I believe from early discussions with Granicus, and again, it depends on a cost, but I believe that there was a way of putting updates on the portal, so members could be aware of sort of if there were, if there'd been a traffic accident or blockages or whatever, so that if you had any queries, then you could filter those down. So I wonder whether that's something that could go into the, we could feed that back into the portal working group to see if there's ability to put almost like sort of a live news feed. I don't know if this is possible, members, so obviously I'd have to feed it back, but I wonder whether that would be useful, so then members can actually see, the works that are going on, so that you can answer then queries that you're having from your constituencies. So I'm certainly willing to take that back to the working group to see if that's something that can be explored, obviously within resources.
Yeah, thank you. If I can come back in there, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Laura. But I mean, why has it stopped? This is what we used to have quite regularly, and all of a sudden it stopped. And I've asked Councillor John Spanzik, why? Why is this stopped? It was such an easy thing to do. That is my query, and that is my question, and that is my concern, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and that will be fed back. Thank you. Councillor Sean Aspey?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to concur with Councillor James, because in years gone by, if something was going to be happening that would cause certain issues within the ward, then the borough member was always informed, so we had sort of prior warning. One of the things recently was the utilisation of hotels for temporary accommodation, where we had 39 people put into hotels with a massive rise in antisocial behaviour, among other things. And this was negotiated on a rolling contract, and not once, right the way throughout those 3 years, was I informed that these had been utilised or the contracts had been extended. It seems like officers just decided that they were going to carry on regardless, and I was the one that was getting all of the complaints from residents, thefts, burglaries, all sorts. It was quite unnerving, and the fact is you want to support those people and you had no information whatsoever.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we go to the recommendation now.
Thank you, Chair. So just remind members of the recommendation. It's to note the report and its appendices, identify any additional member development topics or briefings for inclusion in the member development programme, and then to prioritise those accordingly, which we've done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now going to go to the Democratic Services Committee Forward Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. So this is your usual report, members, and it's to present your proposed forward work programme and for you to consider any further development. Just by way of background and as a reminder, under the Local Government Wales measure, that establishes the need for the authority to have a Democratic Services Committee, and then the functions of the committee are set out in our constitution. I'll briefly take you to Appendix A, which is the draft forward work programme for the Democratic Services Committee. Members are requested to note that there are no dates at present, because obviously the programme of ordinary meetings for the Council and the Council committees for 2024-2025 will be approved at the annual meeting in May 2024. So we await those dates. At the moment it's showing as to be confirmed. Just a reminder that you will have those regular reports, the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales draft annual report. That will come again soon. Normally we expect that in October. For 2025, 2026, just to make that point, because the final report of the IPRW is expected any time now, and that will be reported to full council for the year 2024 to 25. So that will go to full council. But then the draft for the year ahead will come back later in the autumn. You also have your annual report, which is a requirement under the Act for the committee to have an annual report. So that will come back to the committee. So if members then have any other items that they would like to add to the forward work programme, otherwise the recommendation is to consider that draft programme, which is attached at Appendix A. And like I've advised members, if there's any items that you'd like to include, we're happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay, is there any comments, etc., that need to be made? Councillor Spiller?
Yes, thank you, Chair. When at the last meeting of the Democratic Services Committee, we discussed the need to review the Constitution. And I think with the amount of cuts that we're now looking to make across the board, it's absolutely crucial that officers' time is spent in a productive way. I think the committee as a whole pretty much agreed the fact that the announcements at the beginning of our full council meetings are taking a considerable amount of time. And given the fact that the public expects us to be democratic and answerable to them, is there a way in which we can bring the Constitution back into this committee to have a look and see if we can actually strengthen its aims and perhaps look at taking out some of the unnecessary information that could be shared by email and often is shared by email on a daily basis, rather than rather than using officers' time and members' time to listen to that for 45 minutes at the beginning of each meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Spiller. So first of all, the Constitution isn't actually, a review of the Constitution isn't actually a function of this committee. When we previously undertook the full review, that was because we were hoping to adopt the All Wales model, which is across the 22 local authorities, which is what we did. And it was proposed that we bring that working group to the Democratic Services Committee. Members will be aware that I led members on that full review of the committee constitution. And I believe, so under the Constitution, just to be clear, amendments can be made by the monitoring officer. So it's not actually a function of this committee, but she can certainly ask this committee to, again, I think it worked very well having a working group rather than taking it to a full meeting of the committee where, you know, we go through the Constitution line by line. I believe that queries have been fed back to Kelly as the monitoring officer in relation to further suggested amendments to the Constitution. Again, procedurally, there'll be changes that we'll need to make eventually, because if we look to make changes to our contract procedure rules, because we've got new procurement legislation coming in later in the autumn, that will require again an amendment to the Constitution. So I believe the plan is to look at, I think the monitoring officer is welcome to do another review of the Constitution. And I think she's taking comments that have been received from members so that we can look at doing that. And again, if she's in agreement, we can bring it back to the committee to set up a working group, and we can work through that again, bring it back to the committee, and then any changes go to full council. What I would say is that it's a very long and timely exercise. So it's not something I believe that we'd be able to do on an annual basis, because again, officer and members' resources in relation to going through the Constitution. But certainly, we can certainly, I know it is the plan to, for members, you know, they're welcome to feedback those comments on suggested amendments to the Constitution to the monitoring officer, and then we can potentially look at setting up another working group. Does that help? Thank you.
It does help, but my recollection when we approved that Constitution, or recommended to full council that they approve that new All Wales Constitution, was that it was brought back into this committee after a period of time to see how it was functioning and make recommendations for any changes. Up until this point, it has not come back to this committee, as we previously suggested, and certainly there does need to be that scope for reviewing, and especially now where we're facing year-on-year cuts and constraints to budgets, where we look at doing things in a more economic way, both in terms of officers' time and of course for members' times as well. So if there is a way in which we can bring that back as previously suggested, even for a working group to make recommendations and perhaps to look at the recommendations made to the monitoring officer, then perhaps we can form together some conclusions for the monitoring officer to consider, obviously making then to full recommendations to full council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richard Granville.
Chair, just to bring the debate back to a little bit of normality, I would formally move we accept the committee's work for programme going forward.
Do we have a seconder for that? Hughes?
Yes, thanks. Sorry to mess up the procedure, because I know you've asking for a seconder, which I'm happy to give. But just coming back on the Constitution issue, what we did as a council is we took on the All Wales sort of model Constitution, which in itself was quite new, which was new at the time, wasn't it? I just wonder whether it's important that we as a council look at it from our own perspective. But is there feedback going back to the WLGA and to Welsh Government about that initial constitution, the All Wales Constitution, because the possibility is that that in itself might be revised, and it's important that we keep step with that also. So it's a bit more complicated than it sounds, but certainly with something as radical as introducing that, I would have thought that the All Wales model itself would be subject to review. So we need to find out about that also.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So just to clarify, members will be aware that the Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021, that brought in a number of changes that required us to update our constitution. So at the time, the All Wales Monitoring Officer Group, they decided to instruct Brown Jacobson, which is a legal firm, to actually draft an All Wales constitution that appropriately covered everything that was in the current rules, regulations, but also brought in the requirements under the new piece of legislation. We didn't have to formally adopt that All Wales model. There was no requirement for us to do so. And actually, as part of that exercise, before it was taken to the work group, I had to go through it to make it local to Bridgend. So there are obviously things that we adopted and left in that worked for us, and obviously there'll be other local authorities that decided to retain their own constitution but just brought in the Local Government and Election Wales provisions. So for example, at the back of our constitution, I thought it was beneficial to bring in those member role descriptions for what is the role of, for example, the chair of the audit committee, the audit committee member. Some local authorities don't have that in their constitution. So again, it is a local choice as to what you actually want to include. With regard to, so it wasn't actually a WLGA, it didn't come from WLGA, just to clarify that. It was actually a firm of solicitors, Brown Jacobson, that actually pulled together a constitution that was going to cover off everything that would be required. And it was almost then sort of a template where you had to go and fill in the blanks of what works, what works for you in relation to what committees you have, your membership. So they're not going to be looking to undertake a review of that All Wales. It would be, again, whether the council wanted to, we as a council wanted to look to review our constitution, which we can do. Like I've said, there is provision in the constitution in relation to the monitoring officer being able to accept recommendations and make amendments to the constitution. Certainly, Councillor Spiller, I'm willing to look back over the report that went to council. Certainly, if it did say that it come back to this committee, we can certainly look to do that. I think it would, if we did do it, I think it would be more beneficial to again set up a working group rather than take it to the full committee. So again, if we did that, it would be very much looking to establish that working group and to have members who would like to sit on that working group again, whether we had the same membership or if we wanted to revisit it, that would be a matter for the committee. But as I said, I'm certainly aware that there have been other suggestions in relation to potential amendments to the Constitution. So the monitoring officer is going to go through those to see what can be accepted, what cannot, because obviously you appreciate there are some things we cannot take out of the Constitution because they are procedurally required by law, for example. But yes, it's certainly something that I'll feed back.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Councillor Spiller.
Yes, thank you very much for all that clarification, Laura. It was my understanding that we certainly went through your recommendations at the time, and we pick and choose which bits to include based on that All Wales model. So therefore, I'd like to propose an amendment to the Democratic Services Committee Forward Work Programme, and that is to form a working group to make recommendations to the monitoring officer with regards to the application of the All Wales model constitution that Council adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Spiller. Like I've said, I will be feeding back to the monitoring officer because obviously, I've got to be clear that it's not a function of this committee to review the Constitution. So I'll feed back that it is a recommendation of this committee that you would like to propose setting up a working group to look at a review of the Constitution again. But obviously, I just have to, remind members that you don't have that automatic right because it's not a function of the committee. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Who wishes to speak on the forward work programme? So is everyone in favour of accepting the recommendations with that amendment that we've already made?
Aye.
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 We're on mute, Chair.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Before we close the meeting, there are no urgent items, but I'd just like to wish Laura a very happy birthday and thank her for her time today. Obviously, there's nothing better than spending your birthday in a council meeting, but thank her for her time today and thank you all for attending. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you
Happy
too, Chair,
birthday,
for
Laura.
stepping in
Yeah,
and
thank you.
doing such a good job.
Happy birthday, Laura. Thank you.
Happy birthday.